I got some news for everybody. And the news is all this research I've been doing into the ancient world, into the deep mysteries, the ancient Greek sources, the Latin sources, the Coptic sources, the Hebrew sources, the Aramaic sources, going all the way to the Punic sources, Ashmun. And I realized something. I realized they're all pointing to Jesus. See, Justin Martyr figured it out early on. Justin Martyr said that the reason why that all these other stories have some similar aspects going on, Justin Martyr said in his apology, Dionysus is the son of God whose dismemberment and resurrection is praised by all the ancients. And he says, Mithras is the god that gives us the Eucharist, and Hercules' temptations and passions saved humankind. What else does he say in that text? He says, and it's like Perseus being born of a virgin. What else does he say in that text? He points out other different different aspects of these characters that are obviously demonic, right? They're not real. They're demonic. But Justin Martyr, as he says, they are pointing to Jesus because the demons knew the whole time what was going to happen. And it only makes sense. If you know what's going to happen, the only logical thing is to go against that thing, to be the opposer, right? That makes perfect sense. Why? What else would you do? Would you join it? Oh, of course not. You got to be a demon, right? Demons can only do demon things. Anyways, Eusebius nailed it. There's a book that Eusebius wrote in the 4th century. And it's called Preparatio Evangelica. And Eusebius points this out very well. He says, the Phoenicians even had a story about the only begotten Son being sacrificed for the sins of mankind. All of this predates Jesus. And he says, this is even the pagan Gentile world is pointing to Christ. And so here we are, about 2-3 years, I actually come up on 3 years since I started this channel. And I have to say, my big announcement is that I can't deny it. I can't deny it. All this stuff is pointing to Jesus, even the pagan stuff. So therefore, I have to admit, I have to be real. I have to admit it. Christianity is true. I got my Kanye hat on. We're ready to rock. You guys can hear me, right? I didn't just do that again for no reason, right? Can someone in the comments say, yeah, I heard everything you just said? Somebody. Because I just saw someone named Isis say, I have no sound. It's been a while since I went live. I got to get used to this shit again. By the way, I'm going to plan on doing this every week from now on. Yes, you're right, Kyle. This isn't a joke. Kyle, I am going back to being a fundamentalist. I am ready. I got some videos that I want to play. I want to talk about my videos. I want to push back against all of you satanic demons in the chat. Just wait till you see what I got for you guys. Ears to hear. Okay, good. All right. Sound is good. First thing I want to do now that I'm freshly saved, baptized in the fire this time. No water, fire. I'm baptized in the fire. I'm the highest Christian there can be. There's different levels of this shit. You guys know that, right? You can get baptized in water and just be a normal Christian, or you can get baptized in the fire like the Holy Spirit. And then you're one of the elect ones. That's me. That's why you get the Kanye hat. That's what I'm rocking right now. Anyways, I want to do some reacting to some shit that I've been, and anyone who has any questions on my previous video, please ask about it, because I know it's pretty controversial shit. Some of the stuff I'm saying is going against the scholarly consensus, and I know that, and I'm going to address that. The whole concept of the dying and rising God. It's one of those things that if you're a New Testament scholar, it's like a bad word. But I'm going to show that not only is that the idea that this has been you'll hear this from New Testament Bible scholars. You'll say, "Oh, the concept of dying and rising God has been totally rejected in modern academia." That's not true. Philology in the area of classical philology, dying and rising God is still a category. It's tweaked from what James Frazier used to call it. It's mostly just dying gods or katabasis, gods that descend and return. Katabasis, anabasis. But you'll hear that if in like SBL world, like the seminarian world, this is like bad word, dying and rising God. Don't say that. That's bad word. It's like you'll see that you'll hear that. But I'm going to show you that shit is dumb. I had that on the back burner right now. So with that being said, let's go to let's just go to that first, since that has a lot to do with my last video. All right. As a newly found Christian, I'm going to play a clip from my other fellow brother in Christ. His name is Dr. Dan McClellan. Let's go.
Hey, everybody. I'm Dan McClellan. I'm a scholar of the Bible and religion, and the fit for this video is Miles Morales. Let's take a look at a video.
Does it ever bother you that the story of a man who was born of a virgin, was resurrected, your bio was something that was going around the Mediterranean for at least 1,000 years? We've got Krishna, who was in India 1,000 years before Christ. Krishna was a carpenter, born of a virgin, baptized in a river.
Are you saying that was written in history? That was written down in history, is what you're saying?
Absolutely. There's the Persian god Mithras, 600 years before Christ, born December 25th, performed miracles, resurrected on the third day, known as the Lamb, the Way, the Truth, the Light, the Savior, Messiah.
Stop! Blasphemer!
No, I would
That is a blasphemy right there. Let's get him for that one.
say stop pseudo-scholarship. Literally none of this is accurate. These are...
All right. Here's what I hate about these videos, because there's like this is what happens every time this subject gets brought up. That video from Bill Maher was absolute crap. And I don't even know who cut that up, because it looks like they were like signaling only the things that that Bill Maher is saying that are just nuts. There is no Krishna born of a virgin. Well, there might be. I don't know. Of December 25th. Of all the same, like all these specific attributes that they say. None of that exists. So whenever this gets brought up, there's a straw man immediately gets created. This straw man. It says they will go right to Zeitgeist or Bill Maher or Timothy Freak book, whatever that book's called, the Jesus Mysteries, and that's it. And no one ever takes this subject seriously because they're only presented with that. So, all right, let's continue to see what he says here.
There are claims that people made up, and you will never find any of them refer to a primary textual source or any material.
That is categorically false. Now, I don't know. I don't know. This is hard to do, because if we're just looking at what Bill Maher said in that video, then I agree with Dan here. That was just absolute garbage. There's so many better arguments to make, especially James Frazier. Everybody talks for some reason, James Frazier became the face of the dying and right. Well, I think he coined the term, but this concept has been built upon not just by James Frazier, but others. But for some reason, James Frazier gets blamed for doing what Bill Maher just did, even though he doesn't. If you read The Golden Bog, it's well written and it's very specific, and it's pertaining to festivals and rituals amongst Phoenicians and Syria, Adonis, the Holy Week of Attis. It's not really focused on the mythology or text as much as what Bill Maher's trying to do. Bill Maher's trying to do this thing where he's going to things that happen in the Gospels and then saying these guys did those things too. We're like, what are we doing? Who cares about that stuff? What I think matters the most in this conversation is looking at the culture, the way culture is influenced by the previous cultures. That's just how it works. Christianity is not special. It's not I was talking to what's his name, Dennis McDonald, a couple days ago on the phone, and it's Christian scholars, they do this thing where it's like they had this. I don't know if they're taught this. I don't know if it's like dogma in Christian scholar circles, but there's this idea that Christianity is the only fish in the pond that can't get wet. That all these other cultures are all influencing each other except Christianity is the secret, like special, pure, sanctified religion that's just sitting in this. It's sitting in the midst of all these other places, all these other cults in the same region, Mediterranean, Mesopotamian world, same world that we're all talking about. There's all these other cults belong in. For some reason, Christianity is just pure, can't have any influence from anywhere else. It's nonsense. So I just want to rewind what he just said there, because he makes a really interesting, easy to check claim here. Ready?
Any of them refer is accurate. These are claims that people made up, and you will never find any of them refer to a primary textual source or any material remains from the ancient world that demonstrate any of these.
Easy. He just set the bar so low, because it's not a question of is there textual primary sources of this said stuff. That's yes, 100% fact. Yes, there is. The question, if I was on his side or if I was him, the question should then be, do we know that they influenced the Christians, or is it all just a coincidence? But he doesn't say that. He just drops the bar to the floor and just says you won't find any sources, primary sources, that corroborate any of these claims. Let's continue to see what he says before I start pulling stuff up.
Claims. Again, because they're entirely made up. They were primarily popularized in 2007 by a movie called Zeitgeist, but the makers of that movie didn't invent these claims. As far as I can tell, the first people to combine these claims together and popularize them were Timothy Freak and Peter Gandy, two people with no relevant expertise who have never published peer-reviewed scholarship, who published this book, The Jesus Mysteries, in 1999, in which they gathered together all these claims about everyone and their mother having been born of a virgin on December 25th in front of 3 shepherds who brought them the same exact gifts, and then they had 12 followers, and they were baptized in the River Jordan and by John the Baptist, and they were crucified, and they rose on the 3rd day, and they all magically...
Yeah, no, I get what he's saying, but I disagree with what he's also concluding, because, okay, let me, first of all, why am I even talking about Dan McClellan right now? Well, I wanted to talk about my recent video, and a lot of comments were like, Dan McClellan debunked this. Dan McClellan debunked this. So I wanted to see what they're talking about. What did he debunk? And I'm thinking, okay, this looks like something that might be related to what I was discussing in my video. Another one of his videos was about the goddess Eostre and Ishtar. And it might have been here. Let me show you something real quick. So let me just go to YouTube and just go, because Derek Lambert shared this video on Myth Vision podcast. Share. All right. Derek shared this video. You guys can see my screen, right? Okay, cool. Go to his community tab, and if you go down, you'll find my video. And some guy wrote, you do realize that Dr. McClellan has refuted 90% of whatever would turn out to be in that video. Okay, so he saw the title, he saw the after 3 days Ishtar rose, he saw that it's about Easter, assumed what was in my video was something to do with Ishtar being related to Easter. And yeah, so this is what I wrote. I wrote back. I said, hey, am I in there? How can you claim that 90% of my video was debunked before even, because you can tell he hasn't watched it. You can't debunk primary sources. So the majority of my video is not even me saying anything. It's just me showing primary sources. I do talk about Eostre, and what I do is I tried to instead of just what you normally get from people when the topic gets brought up. Normally, what happens is this is how it goes. Ishtar and is Eostre, they're the same thing, and then somebody who is educated on this subject or a linguist or will say no, Eostre is Germanic, it's Indo-European. Ishtar is Akkadian, that's from Afro-Asiatic. They're not related in any way. Language-wise, they're not related in any way. But the source that we get Eostre from is from 7th century Bede. And we're talking late in the game. Synchronism is the biggest thing in all pagan religions by that time. Dawn, her name is Eostre. She's a dawn goddess, obviously. Eos means dawn in that language. It's also the same month. So I'm putting my thinking cap on right now. It's also the same month as April, the month for Venus. Aphrodite is where we get April from. April. Aphrodite. Venus. Venus is the dawn star. This is no secret. Plato, actually, I have it right here somewhere. In one of Plato's dialogues, he talks about where the name why we named the planet after Aphrodite. He says it's because of the Babylonians, and it's because of Ishtar. He doesn't say Ishtar, but he says because the Babylonians named these 7 planets, they named it after the goddess, the spring goddess, the fertility goddess. And he said, "Oh, what a beautiful name to give such a beautiful planet. Of course, it has to be Ishtar, Venus." Or he says Aphrodite. So, okay, we have a dawn goddess whose month correlates to April, Aphrodite. Okay, in the 7-day week calendar for the Romans, Friday would be Freya's day in the Germanic, but also in the Latin side, it's Venus's day. So there's a lot of things that point this date. So I'm talking about interpreting the data here. I'm saying, can you link Ishtar to Eostre? Yes, not through linguistics, but in a late 6th, early 7th century synchronistic way of doing of comparing gods and religions, that would be legit, in my opinion. Very legit to compare 2 dawn goddesses together. That's all I said. That was as far as I went with that one. Oh, I also pointed out that Tacitus, when he's talking about the Germanic goddess, he compares her to Isis. So you have another early 2nd century source saying there's goddesses in that region that you could compare to Isis. So there you go. By the way, there's another thing that I noticed about people talking about Eostre is that we know nothing about this goddess at all. Like, there's only Bede mentions her and there's nothing else. That's not necessarily true. There are inscriptions all over Lithuania, Germany, Poland, all over the northern, eastern Europe region. And there's inscriptions of this Mother Eostre goddess. We just don't have any texts written about it. But there's inscriptions. There's like hundreds of them, hundreds. And you can get a pretty good idea of like what she's like. She's motherly. She's got all the same, if you know a lot about late paganism, which I would say I don't not know a lot, I'm not an expert in it, but I know a decent enough to know, like when you read like Apuleius' 2nd century text about Isis, when he mentions synchronism is a big thing in the Common Era, in the Middle Ages as well, where different goddesses are getting synced together. Isis and Aphrodite and Ishtar, they're all kind of they're all getting like they're all different faces of like what is the mother goddess. And there's this goddess, let's see if I think I downloaded an image of her before I went live. Let me see if I could find it. Oh, there it is. Okay. So this is actually her. This is from I think this is from Germany. I'm not really sure. It's from Europe somewhere. Here it is. Where'd it go? 1 second. Let me just try to open that up again. For some reason, it wouldn't let me open it. Hold on a second. Okay. This is what she looks like. Can you see it? Oh, you can only see the file. That's weird. Good thing I'm not like Vosh and dude got some weird shit in there. Anyways, all right. I don't know why it's not letting me pull this up. Is it probably the wrong kind of file or something? That's so weird. It's not letting me share my. Oh, here we go. Okay. All right. So you can see this is her. This is Eostre. And you can see it says Matronus Asanya. So it's got that Eos Dawn root right there. Now it might be a different goddess, but I would probably bet that there's overlap. They're both dawn goddesses. They're both motherly goddesses. Something along those lines, right? But yeah, I don't even know what I was trying to say there. Okay, here's the big point now. Dan McClellan says that you won't find any primary sources to suggest that any of these gods, for example, I think the big one is December 25th. So let's just knock that one out the park right away, right? Shall we? Okay. The December 25th one is the easiest one to like investigate or to explore. So you get there's early source from Plutarch. Plutarch's early 2nd century. Now, here's what a lot of people will try to do with Plutarch. Because he's early 2nd century, it means he's after the Gospels, right? He's obviously borrowing from the Gospels. Well, no. This is a contemporary source. The Gospels weren't known to everybody right away. Especially Plutarch. Guess how much we have thousands of pages of writings from Plutarch. Guess how much he mentions the Christians? He never does. So he has no knowledge. If he does have any knowledge of them, he doesn't ever say anything. So we don't know for sure. We can't say that. Also, it's a contemporary idea, is what I would say. So here's what he says about that. He says, is this the right page? Let me see. Here it is. Okay. He says, in this way we shall undertake to deal with numerous and tiresome people, whether they be such as to take pleasure in associating theological problems with seasonal changes in the surrounding atmosphere, with the growth of the crops and seed times in plowing, and also those who say that Osiris is being buried at the time when the grain is sown and covered in the earth, and that he comes to life and reappears when the plants grow. I'm pretty sure the word that he uses for comes to life is the same word as resurrect too. Yeah, it's in there somewhere. But let's just keep going. For this reason also, it is said that Isis, when she perceived that she was pregnant, put upon herself an amulet on the 6th day of the month of Phaeophi. About the time of the winter solstice, she gave birth to Harpocrates. Now, when he's writing this in the 2nd century, the winter solstice is on December 25th. This is the time of the Julian calendar. This is before the Gregorian calendar. When he says about the time of the winter solstice, you can literally translate that as about December 25th. There's nothing wrong with me saying that. I'm not reading it wrong. I'm not mistranslating that text. He is saying Horus is born. By the way, Horus is called Harpocrates. That's the Greek way to say Horus. Harpocrates is a late Hellenized version of the god Horus. And if you see, Harpocrates is often linked with Attis sometimes, but also sometimes linked with Cupid or Eros. So you got this syncretic deity, Harpocrates, who's linked with Horus and Eros, the son of, sometimes called son of, not always, but later in the Hellenistic time, it's the son of Venus, right? Isis. And he's born at the winter solstice. It says it right here. Amid early flowers and shoots. For this reason, they bring to him as an offering the first fruits of lentils, and the days of his birth they celebrate after the spring equinox. Now that's a big deal, because you have what we're looking at here in an early, in a text that's contemporary with the Gospels. I mean, it's right around the same time. Plutarch is writing this right around the same time as the Gospels are being written. Let's see. Plutarch lived from the year 46 to 119. So he might have even wrote this before the Gospels, at least before John, probably. So yeah, you cannot get away with saying that this is somehow borrowed from the Gospels. No way. He's dead by the year 119. Okay? He probably wrote this long before that. And the Gospels are not even being circulated in the Roman world. No one even knows who the Christians are. Especially, I mean, look at Pliny the Younger. Pliny the Younger in the year like 112, I think it is, he's just hearing about them for the first time. He has no idea who they are. So this shows you right here, Harpocrates being born at this. And by the way, another thing to add here, Jesus was not born on December 25th in the Gospels. So this can't be borrowing from Christianity. Duh. I remember hearing someone say, I think it was Inspiring Philosophy, try to say that about this Plutarch verse. But it could be borrowing from Christianity because it could be late or it could be early. No, it can't. Christianity, there's nothing in the Gospels that say he's born on December 25th. That comes later. So we already have sources talking about this syncretic deity, Harpocrates, who also is linked with Attis, by the way. I'll show you guys that too. I should show you that. Attis Harpocrates. So all right. So we already, Dan's little claim of you can't find any primary sources to suggest any of this stuff. We already knocked the big fish out the park, but there's more. I mean, it gets crazier. Okay, here we go. Amori Attis. Oh no, that's just never mind. That's a later. Somebody from the medieval era did this, but yeah, you could find earlier images. Here's one right here. I think it's Attis. Or yeah, Attis and Horus are like linked together in Egypt in like some depictions of him. That's one of them right there. So Attis is one of them as one example, but Osiris and Serapis and the god Aion. I don't know if you know about the god Aion. This is like a syncretic deity from the late Hellenistic, early, common era, contemporary with Christianity. We're talking late 1st century, 2nd century, 3rd century. And these gods are being synced together, especially when you read Macrobius. And Macrobius points out that he goes straight up and says all of them are born December 25th. Macrobius says it right here. Let's see. This is the one. Macrobius, yeah, I got the source actually. Let me see. It's over here somewhere. Oh yeah, here we go. So here's what Macrobius has to say about this. He says, Macrobius is late, right? But what it does highlight, Macrobius is a little bit later. He's contemporary with like the church times. And he's writing this, I would say 3rd, 4th century. Actually, I should look that up. Macrobius. Yeah, around 400 AD. But what this does show us is that the trend among religious cults was syncretism. And like he says right here, Apollo is the same as the sun, Helios, but afterwards taught that he was, and this is a bad translation, it should say Pater Liber, but they translate it as Father of Liber. Pater Liber is the Latin way to spell Dionysus, or to say it's the Latin title of Dionysus. So he's basically saying Apollo and Dionysus are the same. That's what this should say, but this is just poorly translated. Who is Apollo? There is no doubt from these that the sun and Liber are considered, and again, he's mistranslating Pater. as father. Okay, the same deity. So he's saying Helios, or he's saying Apollo and Dionysus are the same. And here's what he says. For the sacred arcane religious observances held, when the sun is in the upper, that is, in the daytime hemisphere, Apollo is invoked. When in the other world, Dionysus, who is the father of the book. There you go again. Pater Liber gets translated as father of the book somehow. Anyways, whatever. The point, you see the point, right? The point is, people are pointing this out. This is what he says, though. He says, likewise, the children make a mockery of their father, partly as a child, partly as a young man. They are bearded in particular. Is this even right? This translation? Anyways, this is a weird translation. I don't even know why it's so like scattered. Anyways, he says who they call Sabadius. That's Sabasius. And he says, look at these differences of ages are related to the sun, so that the winter solstice, he seems to be a small child. Get it? Born at the winter solstice. Such the Egyptians bring forth from the Adites on a certain day, that is the very short day, it is seen as a small and a child. All right, so there you go. There's more data to suggest that other religions had this sort of divine childbirth at the winter solstice. So we have there's sources, there's data to support that Christianity sort of is looking. You don't have to go to Mithras or Sol Invictus to get there. Now, here's another thing that I wanted to talk about with the whole Sol Invictus thing. And you'll hear this a lot. You'll hear people say, this is so annoying too. You'll hear people say, because Aurelian decided that the feast was in 354 and that we have texts from a few decades before that are suggesting that Jesus was born on the winter solstice, that means the Christians were first? Bullshit. That's the dumbest. I've seen peer-reviewed articles that have pushed this crap, and they don't get specific, or they are very specific, which is sneaky. They don't say anything about the winter solstice being venerated. Like, we can prove the winter solstice was venerated by the Persians. They marked their calendars as the birthday of the sun at the winter solstice. And you have, during the Severan dynasty, way before the Christians marked Jesus on this day, the Severans are already starting to bring veneration of the solstices into some of their observances. Now, the feast that Aurelian does is later, but that's already like at the end of that's the last thing that happens. It doesn't even matter at that point. Like, it doesn't, all you're showing Christians decided Jesus was born on December 25th before Aurelian made it an official holiday. But that doesn't say anything about people venerating that, especially with the source you just saw from Plutarch. So I don't know. I don't know why people are so hung up on Aurelian's feast date as if that like matters or means anything. It doesn't mean anything. So I don't know. That's a weird one. Now, what are other ones that I wanted to get into? Does anyone have any questions, by the way, about my video? There's a lot of comments. Holy shit. I can't even keep up with you guys. But anyways, let's keep going. So I want to go back to what he said. I want to replay what he said about the you just saw me pull up a bunch of sources. All right.
Pseudo scholarship. Literally none of this is accurate. These are claims that people made up, and you will never find any of them.
Just showed you guys one.
Them refer to a primary textual.
Is Plutarch not a primary text?
Source, or any material remains from the ancient world that demonstrate any of these claims.
Sorry, you looks like you've been demonstrated on. Sorry, Dr. McClellan. Let's see what else we got. Oh yeah, and somebody was saying in the comments that Bart Ehrman would do someone in the comments of my last video said something about Bart Ehrman, and I just shake my head because I don't care about Bart Ehrman or Dan McClellan. They're not like Super Saiyan here, like they're not like they don't have like magic powers. So I'll just to show you who we're dealing with Bart Ehrman. Why don't we go to Bart Ehrman now? Let's save some of the punches for Bart Ehrman. I mean, this guy's writing articles about Diogenes Poliocrates. He says, I don't know, how has this not been edited yet? It's been up since 2016. I mentioned in the previous post, it's scarcely remembered these days, Diogenes Poliocrates. You guys know who that is? Let's see if anyone says they know who this is. Does anyone in the comments know who Diogenes Poliocrates is? Let's see if there's any liars here. Tell me if you know who that is. If anyone, I want to see, write in the comments. Yeah, I know who that is. Yeah, exactly. Because he doesn't exist. He got his name wrong. It's Demetrius, dummy. Demetrius Poliocrates. By the way, scarcely remembered. Ask anyone who studies the Hellenistic era knows who Demetrius Poliocrates is. I mean, like I was talking about this with some of the other recently about the Diadochi, the period of between Alexander the Great and probably I would say up until Augustus, that 200-300 year period. Demetrius is one of the most famous examples and most widely known of all of them. He's the most written about. I mean, Plutarch has an entire book written about him called The Life of Demetrius. He's compared to Dionysus. They thought he was. He got that right, actually. He says down here, he says, who was acclaimed as a divine being by him, writer, and others. Yeah, you're right. But you got his name wrong. Not trying to beat up on Bart. I like Bart, and I like Dan too. But like their knowledge of Greek religion is bullshit. It's just crap. Just gonna say it because I've watched them say shit sometimes, and I just easily could be like, I can even check that. I'm not an expert or anything, but like the whole idea that like these Greek mystery cults that are heavily influenced by the philosophies of Plato and Pythagoras and Aristotle, Philo's a prime example, that this somehow can't affect Christianity at all is so dog shit crazy. It really is. That's kind of been where my work has been leading to, is to show that stuff. But anyways, let's keep going. So what else can we show? Krishna, born of a virgin? I don't fucking know. I don't really know a lot about Krishna, to be honest. I think that was a terrible example. But let's go to. There was another video about that I wanted to show from Dan McClellan. I think this will be better to rather than like argue over what gods did what. I think that's a dumb thing to do. I think the better thing to do is look at like the culture. Because the culture is like we know how culture works. Culture influences culture, and that's how it is. Like the culture today is influenced by the culture from a decade ago, and so forth. The 60s leads into the 70s, and the 70s leads into the 80s. It's just how it is. Like there is no Christianity does not get exempt from that stuff, from the evolution, from the way it works. This is Epiphanius, right? Now, Epiphanius is writing about the early Christians venerating Jesus on January 6th. This is before. Just so you guys know, before December 25th became the birthday of Jesus, it was January 6th. Now, I've heard Religion for Breakfast saying in one of his videos that the reason why he doesn't think that Christians are looking to co-opt this date is because of the January 6th thing. And I just thought, that's weird. I go, that, because to me, that's an even better reason to think they co-opted this. And I'll just give you an example. Like, here's what Epiphanius says about this day. And then, by the way, Clement of Alexandria in the year 200 talks about the only people who were venerating Christ's birthday were these Gnostics called the Basilidians. I'll get into that in a second. Just remember that, though. Early on, December 25th, January 6th, that was all Gnostic shit. That was all like, I should say, people like me, I should say, anyways. So he says, this is what he says in Greek. For indeed, the Savior was born in the 42nd year of the reign of Augustus, emperor of the Romans, during his 13th consulship, together with Silanus, as recorded in the Roman consulships. It is stated thus during their consulship that the 13th of Octavius and Silanus, Christ was born 8 days before the calends of January, 13 days after the winter solstice, and the addition of light and day. This day is celebrated by the Greeks, the idolaters, on the 8th day before the calends of January, which the Romans call Saturnalia, the Egyptians call Chronia, and the Alexandrians call Cacalia. For on the 8th before the calends of January, this division occurs, which is the solstice, and the day begins to increase as light gains addition, completing a number of 13 days up to the 8th before the calends of January. So he's saying, like, the reason why the January 6th is an important day is it's the completion of the solstice season of course, whatever, And by the way, I was going back and forth with I forgot his name. Can't remember his name. Tim O'Neill. He has this channel. Oh my god, it's so bad. The something atheist, where he's basically, it's like his whole shtick is to defend Christianity from an atheist perspective. So like all of his videos and articles that he writes are like, Christianity's not pagan. Stop saying that. That's all he basically does. And like he'll just like withholds information and only focuses on certain things. Some of the stuff I'll get into in a second. Anyways, someone like him would read this and say, but Saturnalia is not in the new year. January is not Saturnalia. No shit, dummy. It's because if you look at the way the Romans celebrated the end of the year, Saturnalia and the calends of January basically blended into each other. So you had Saturnalia leading up to the 23rd of January or December, and then you had like a couple day period where the solstice would happen, and then you had the calends of Janus, and there was another giant week-long festival once again. So it was just like the way we are today in America. When December hits, businesses start to close. The closer you get to Christmas, the more crazier it gets. Everything shuts down all the way through the New Year's time. And so this is what they were doing. This is no different back then than it was today. Anyways, so this is what he's basically getting at. He's basically saying he calls it Saturnalia. It doesn't mean it's literally Saturnalia. He's basically just speaking like tongue in cheek. Like we call it Saturnalia, but really it's just this whole end of the year festival. And he's saying that the 6th of January is the last day of that. By the way, there's more evidence that I'm going to show you that adds to what he's saying here. And it's crazy. It gets into Dionysus and everything. He says each day adding 30 hours up to the day of Christ's birth. Also, this wise Ephraim among the Syrians testified to this word in his explanation, saying, thus was ordained the coming of our Lord Jesus Christ, the birth according to the flesh, or rather the perfect incarnation, which is called Epiphany. All right, that's the 6th of January. By the way, there's another thing they celebrate on that day. And they say that on the 6th of January is the same day of the wedding of Cana. And I think it's not a coincidence that they had that on the same day. I'll get to that why. He says, from the beginning of the increase of light for a span of 13 days. For this has also had to become the type of our Lord Jesus Christ and his 12 disciples, fulfilling the number of the 13 days of light's increase. And many other things have happened and happen in support of testimony of this word. For even the leaders of the idolatry religion, here's where this would never pass today. You could only say this back then. Forced to confess a part of the truth, and the deceivers to deceive those convinced by them. Idolaters in many places conduct a great festival on the very night of the Epiphany. What? What? Are they copying the Christians? What's going on here? So that those hoping in the deception would not seek the truth. First, in Alexandria, in the so-called Corium. The Corium. You know what that is, right? Isis is called Cori. It's one of her titles. Is that her title? Is that her No way. There is a great temple, the precinct of the Kori. By the way, if anyone pays attention to Greek mythology, which I know both Dan and Bart don't do, they would know that's the mother of Dionysus. And Dan would probably say, no, Semele is. He said her name wrong in that one video. No, it's Semele. And I'm sure Bart would probably say the same thing. No, it's Semele. No, you're both wrong. The firstborn Dionysus is born of the Kori. Then he dies, gets dismembered, and resurrects. Okay? So Semele is the second birth. Or Semele, I should say. The linguist calls it Semele. The linguist would know. No, it's not Semele, it's Semele. Anyways, the linguist gets the name wrong. He knows everything about this stuff, so we should listen to him, right? For staying awake in the entire night with certain songs and flutes, singing to the idol, and spending the whole night. After the crowing of the roosters, they descend with torches into a certain underground shrine. Now, here's your only defense against this. I'm going to continue in this in a second. If you're someone like Inspiring Philosophy or Dan McClellan, or your only defense right now is, this is all made up. Didn't happen. It's all made up. It's late. It's a late source. It's a late source. All right, fine. You can believe that all you want. But don't set the bar so low as to tell me that all I need to do is find primary sources, because I just found primary sources. You can disagree with the primary sources, but they exist. Anyways, they descend with torches into a certain underground shrine and bring out a certain wooden statue seated on a litter, naked, having a golden seal of a cross on the forehead and two other such seals on each hand, and another two on the two knees, together with 5 seals made of gold. And they carry this statue around the middle of the temple 7 times with flutes and drums and hymns. And after celebrating, they again bring it down into the underground place. Being asked what this mystery is, they reply and say that it is at this hour today, the Kori, that is the virgin, gave birth to Aion. Dun, dun, dun. This also happens in the Petra, in the city, metropolis of Arabia, which is Edom in the scriptures, the idol temple there. And they praise the virgin in the Arabic dialect, calling her in Arabic Ka'abu, that is Kori, or the virgin. And the one born of her was Dusaris, that is the only begotten of the Lord. This also takes place in Elusa, on the city of the night, and there in Petra and in Alexandria. So this happens in 3 different cities, he says. So who are these gods? We know who they are. They're not made up. This isn't like late 5th century shit. These guys are not being worshipped anymore by the time this is written. So let's look it up. Let's look at who is Aion. Aion is a very interesting god. I'm just going to go to the Wikipedia just to make it simple. I'm not going to keep pulling up all these different sources. You guys can check into all this stuff. Don't take anything I say. If I'm looking at Wikipedia stuff, we can check who wrote it. I read this article. It's a 1944 article by Doro Levi, called in the Hesperia. I have a prescription of this, and I actually read this when I made a video about December 25th. And this article is really cool. They have let me see if I can still get to it. Let me see if I still have access to it. Oh wait, no, it didn't even bring me to the right place. Anyways, whatever. So yeah, the article basically shows in Syria, in the 2nd century in Syria, there's a mosaic. It's in Antioch, Syria too, the first place where Christians are from, Christianoi. And it's a 2nd century mosaic of Aion, and he's sitting with 3 of his disciples, and they're drinking wine and eating bread. Let's see if they have it here. No, they don't. Let me see if I can look it up, actually. Aion mosaic. Antioch. Here, I found it. That's what it looks like. So you can see people in Antioch are venerating this god who it's you could see without even having to look into this, you can kind of just see where the religious attitudes are of this era. And people are looking for a savior who's very meek and modest. That's Aion right here. You can see Aion. You can see it right here in Greek. And this is past, present, and future. So these are basically, they're called the chronoi. They're described as his disciples, but they're also him. So it's really weird. But yeah, they're at a little banquet table. They're enjoying themselves. And that's Aion. So, okay, who is Aion? Let's go back to the Wikipedia article. Why is this god Aion being born of a virgin on the same day as Jesus? That's weird. What's going on here? Well, Aion is a Hellenistic deity. He shows up on the scene at the same time as Jesus. So he doesn't really predate Jesus. He sort of he shows up in the sources basically contemporary with. Like they both show up at the same time, which is, to me, that's even more interesting. So what do the people say about him? Let's look at what people say about him. 5th century author Marcianus Capella identifies him with Kronos. I don't like that comparison. But they're both time gods, so I get what he's doing. Because Aion is a time god. It means like ionic life. Get it? People say eternal life for ionic, but it's ionic life. So he's Aion. So this guy says it's probably Kronos, but it's not. He's wrong. So let's go. What else? What people say? Euripides calls him a son of Zeus. Yeah, he's mentioned in Euripides very shortly and briefly, but there's nothing. Doesn't get into who he is or anything. So yeah, I guess he does. I guess he does predate Jesus. I'm wrong, but if you look at the Euripides post, the Euripides text, it's from like Heraclides. Yeah, that's what I thought. It doesn't give you any idea of who he is. It's very like brief. His name is just mentioned very quickly, and he's gone. There's nothing written about him until the 1st century. All of a sudden, he pops up everywhere. So the Suda says that he's Osiris and Adonis. Whoa. Wait a minute. I thought dying and rising gods don't exist. I thought that's a redundant category. But we have a god named Aion who's born the same day as Jesus, who's identified with Adonis and Osiris? Whoa. That's weird. Anyways, you guys already heard this Epiphanius part. It's getting mentioned right here. Corey the Virgin. All right. In Ptolemaic Alexandria, the Hellenistic syncretic god Serapis was identified as Aion Plutonios. You know, actually, I got to keep correcting myself. As far back as the Alexander Romance, Aion Plutonios is the name that Serapis says that his name is to Alexander. And then you have a text from Plutarch and Tacitus. So early 2nd century, Tacitus and Plutarch both tell a story about Ptolemy the First. You know, Ptolemy the Soter, the first Ptolemy to rule Egypt, the one who was the one that was like running around with Alexander before he started ruling, whatever it's called. So the story goes that Ptolemy had a dream, and in this dream, this god shows up to him, and this god tells him, "Go and find my statue from Sinope in Turkey." And he goes and finds this statue, and it's a statue of the god Asclepius. He's got the serpent coiled around him, and he's sitting next to Persephone. So he goes, "Oh, it's actually Hades." So you got this god who is synced with Hades and Asclepius. He's a healer. He heals the blind. He causes lame people's arms to heal back. He's synced with Osiris. By the way, Osiris resurrects at the springtime. We all know that. That's not only is that in Osiris, or not only does Plutarch say that in the passage I just showed you, but that goes back into the Bronze Age on pyramid texts that say that shit. Okay, so you have this other example of a god. His name's Aion. He's linked with all these other deities: Osiris, Adonis, Hades, Asclepius, Serapis. And my question is, he's born on the same day as Jesus, and he's venerated in all these different cities according to Epiphanius. And my question is, why couldn't Jesus be something like that? Doesn't mean he doesn't exist. This is all. Think about this. Simple scenario. Jesus of Nazareth does his thing. Leads a ministry. He goes down to Jerusalem. He gets crucified. He dies. 40, 50 years go by. And he, for whatever reason, people remember him. And the temple falls. And maybe that's one of the things he predicted. Maybe Jesus predicted the temple was going to fall, and he got it right. Now people are writing gospels about it. All it needs to happen is, and this happens elsewhere, where you write stories and you apply mythological tropes to somebody to make them into a divine person. We see this with Caesar and Augustus. When they get written about, they're getting qualities of Romulus. They're getting qualities of Mars. They do this. This is how they write stories about people who they think are divine. All I'm saying is there's so much data, in my opinion, to suggest that the Gospels are drawing heavily from the Greco-Roman world. But for some reason, in biblical scholarship circles, it's like there's a knee-jerk reaction to even bringing that up. There's something else I wanted to bring up. So there's another video that I saw from Dan recently, and I wonder if I could find it. He puts out a lot of videos. By the way, I like his stuff. I usually share his stuff too. But I just think he's wrong on this. I just think he's flat wrong on when he starts talking about Christianity and Greek mythology. I just don't think he knows what he's talking about at all. I think he's like This is what I can't stand about people like Bart and Dan. It's like in their heads they think they're if they don't know something, it's not true, and they think they know everything. Like in their heads, they've read every single source that exists in the entire world. So if someone brings up something that they never heard, it can't be right because I know everything. It can't be right. Well, it's like, no, there's a lot of shit that you could have easily said in that video. Like when you were refuting Bill Maher, you could have easily been like, Bill Maher's wrong about this. He's wrong about this. But it is true that this is the case. And also this source says this. He didn't do that, which tells me he either doesn't know about these sources, or he knows and is keeping it for some reason withholding it, which is even weirder. I hope that's not the case, but whatever. There's another video that he recently put out about dying and rising gods. I wonder if I could find it. I don't know what it was called, but I thought it was that video that I was playing, but I guess it wasn't. Let me see if I can find it. Eostre. Easter is not a pagan fertility and child sacrifice festival. Is that the one? No. Oh, let's see. Religions as make-believe. That's not the one. Easter. Does Easter celebrate a Babylonian fertility goddess? Is that the one? Let me see. Trinity. That's got to be the one. That's got to be the one. All right, let's play that one.
Made up, and it's not based on any data from the ancient world.
Some people are doing it ignorantly.
We'll hear all over the internet, there is not a single shred of data from it. Hey everybody, I'm Dan McClellan. I'm a scholar of the Bible and religion, and the fit for this video is my own Data Over Dogma hoodie. Let's take a look at a video.
As Christians, we shouldn't be celebrating Easter at all. Easter is not a Christian holiday.
All right, let's see it.
Easter comes from ancient Babylon.
No, it absolutely does not. Easter is a Christian adaptation of the Jewish Passover, which is why the overwhelming majority of Christians around the world today, and ever since Easter began, have always referred to it as some variation on the Hebrew word Pesach, which means Passover. Easter is a name that is only used in German and English and a couple of other Germanic languages. And it is a late secondary name that was adopted by Christians living in Europe probably in the 700s or 800s CE. And they borrowed it from the Anglo-Saxon name of the month of April, Ostermonat. And according to the Venerable Beda, Anglo-Saxons came up with that name based on their own Germanic spring goddess, Eostre. And despite what you will hear all over the internet, there is not a single shred of data from anywhere remotely approximating the ancient world that supports the notion that Easter borrows absolutely anything other than that name from this Germanic spring goddess. The notion that this spring goddess was associated with rabbits and eggs and fertility and all the things that we do in Easter is.
By the way, he doesn't ever say that. We do know we know from the sources and from the data. There's books written about this, peer-reviewed stuff. Professors have written about this, both in Egypt and in Persia. The rite of coloring eggs was already a thing, well documented. Well, it's in my last video. I show the sources. I show the scholars that wrote about it. I show that's just, and it's even in Passover. They have the beitza, the egg on the table. So I don't know. You can say maybe it's a coincidence that Christianity developed its own tradition of the eggs. I just think there's so many coincidences now. Like all this, they do this one by one. They'll find this one thing that looks like something else and say it's not the same. We don't know for sure if they borrowed that. It's like, okay, maybe that's a coincidence. But then there's like 20 of them that pile up, and you're like, all this stuff just you got to just at some point they say they're borrowing it. And by the way, I pointed this out in my Christmas video. It's in Venerable Bede actually. It's part of it's one of his texts. I forgot exactly where it is. I wish I brought it with me, but just fact check me on this. Go look it up. There's a passage from Pope Gregory. It's a letter from Pope Gregory to the Archbishop of where is it? Somewhere in England, okay? And he writes a letter to this bishop in England and tells him, do not destroy the pagan temples and let the pagans keep their festivals. All you got to do, sprinkle some holy water into their temples, take the idol out, put a cross in there, and we're good to go. So we know that it's church doctrine from the sources. This is a 6th century source, something like that. It's church doctrine to keep their traditions alive and just Christianize them. This is like, we see this everywhere. What else? All the temples are just, all the churches are just old pagan temples that are just remodeled into a Christian church. I mean, like this is all known. You get in some of the stories from the early martyrs. You see, there's a lot of like, for example, the big one I like to talk about is Saint Demetrius. And the story goes that he's a devotee of Demeter. He has a dream that the goddess Demeter comes to him and tells him to worship Christ. It's okay. Follow the church. Like, and it's just so obvious what's going on. There's politics involved. And this is what I think about these Christian scholars don't want to admit that there was some dirty politics early on and there was some co-opting going on. But they want you to think that Christianity just against all odds just sort of rose up and some pure religion outside world just took over the world, and all the pagans that had were persecuting them, and they all just had to kind of just get taken over. That's just the way it was. Like, it's just like such a fairy tale, if you know what I mean. By the way, Tetragrammaton, thank you for the super chat. May we all reach closer to the Gnosis each day. Absolutely. I'm going to go back and check if there's any more super chats. I didn't see. I wasn't really paying attention, but I just saw that one. All right. The point I'm making is we know it's church doctrine to repurpose pagan shit They're telling you this in their own letters. Jerome says that the location of the nativity in Bethlehem, the place that everyone goes to today, that everybody goes to Israel, they always go to this place. He says that used to be a place where Adonis was mourned over by Venus. And then when you read the Christian scholars that comment on this, they say he's wrong. Of course. What do you expect? What would you expect them to say? Oh, he's right? No, of course not. So, all right. So he was talking about the eggs thing. Look, can you prove that they stole? I don't think they. By the way, I hate the word stole. Can you prove that the eggs painting was adopted? No. Can you show in the sources in the data that Persians and Egyptians were coloring eggs before Christians? Yes. And if you don't know that, you're an idiot. Sorry, but that's just well known. Everyone, it's all over the place. Sorry. All right, let's keep going. Which page am I on? Am I on the right page? Here we go.
Is something that folklorists in the 19th century made up, and it's not based on any data from the ancient world.
He's wrong. He's wrong again. All right, now that he said that, I got to prove it now. Okay. Coloring eggs. Egyptian. Sham el Nessim. I'm only going to this article because I think there's a source in here. Pretty sure this one has the. No, I think it's the. Is it in here? No, this is not it. All right, hold on one second. I will show you right now. Okay. So, here we go. This book right here. I found it. Okay. Let me share my screen. It's actually in the Wikipedia article. Okay, so this guy right here, Asante Molefikiti, he wrote a book called Culture and Customs of Egypt. He is a professor of Egyptology, or of Africanology, I think they call it. I think he just says ancient Africa in general, not just Egyptian. If you look him up, he's got all the sources in there in that book. He shows it all. He says that coloring eggs was part of the rites. And it's not just random times of the year. It's during the spring equinox. Okay? Also, you can also find sources from King Darius, from the time of King Darius, where the Persians are doing this thing too. So the fact that you can find it in two different parts of the world like that, and we're talking centuries prior to Christianity, I wouldn't be surprised if this gets brought into the fold when Christianity's around. But what he just said was just categorically false, that it's just made up by folklorists in the 19th century. It's not true. Let me see exactly what he said so I don't get it wrong. Maybe I heard him wrong. But I'm pretty sure that's what he just said.
In Easter, spring goddess. The notion that this spring goddess was associated with rabbits and eggs and fertility and all the things that we do in Easter is something that folklorists in the 19th century made up, and it's not based on any data from the ancient world.
Some people are doing it ignorant.
So I think he was talking about do we know it's from her, which we don't. It's before her, way before her. So I don't know even why that matters. Why would that even matter? We already see parts of the world that are doing that right. So wouldn't you look there first? I don't know. Whatever. Who cares?
Ignorantly, they haven't heard that Easter is a Babylonian holiday, but some people have heard it and do know and have gotten the information, and they refuse it.
Some people have the capacity for critical thought.
So in ancient Babylon,
that's a good point.
there was a goddess that they worship named Semiramis?
No, there wasn't. In 9th century Assyria, there was a queen named Shamuramat. And in 5th century BCE and 1st century BC.
Oh, I think I know what's happening here. I don't know if Dan picked up on it, but I did. There's a shitty ass book by a Christian scholar called what the hell is it called? Two Babylons or something? Is that what it's called? It's written by a Christian scholar. The Two Babylons. Yes, Alexander Hislop. This guy was a fucking idiot. He wrote this book called The Two Babylons. Here, I'm going to share it. I think this is what this guy's pushing. And I read it before. I used to be into all this shit. Alexander Hislop, he was a Presbyterian. He wrote this book about Christmas and Easter being pagan. This is where all this shit comes from, by the way. All this crazy. Look, see, his wife Semiramis. Nimrod and Semiramis are not married. This is just completely This is just complete garbage. And this is this book right here. I'm telling you, this is the reason why people like Dan McClellan can't stand anyone talking about Christianity being influenced by paganism. I almost don't blame them because it's such garbage. And I almost want to. I have a conspiracy theory to this day that this book was written on purpose, just to make the whole theory look so bad, because that's what it does. This guy Hislop just literally just makes stuff up about the ancient world, about like Tammuz being a dying and rising god, or like not like because he actually is dying and rising god, but he'll say like, oh, Tammuz was crucified or some crazy shit. Like he'll just make shit up. It sounds like from the video that I'm listening to, it sounds like that's what this guy is referring to. See, look at, for example, Hislop links the name Easter with Astarte, the Phoenician goddess. I'm telling you, this is where it all comes from. I'm like 99% sure this is where it all comes from. But I don't know if Dan's picking up on that yet. But it's just straight garbage. It's not legit. Like there are I've been showing you guys, there are legit ways to do this, to like, if you want to argue that Christianity has influences from the Greco-Roman world, there are legit ways to do this. That's what I've been trying to do on my channel. But the shit that I'm doing gets overshadowed by this crap. And that's why I have to come out and do shows like this and defend it. But he's right. Like some of this stuff is just nonsense. Let's continue.
Greco-Roman writings coming from authors named Ctesias and Diodorus Siculus, they made up a divine figure called Semiramis that is based on the combination of Shamuramat and traditions associated with Ishtar / Inanna / Astarte. And this is known as Naru literature. This is where you take a historical figure and then you elaborate on them and create these narratives that are drawn from other places, and particularly from...
Wait a minute, Dan. Dan, this makes no sense. You're too scholar brain for this shit. Because even if you were right, you didn't... This is so dumb. I don't know how you thought this was a smart idea. Even if you were right, which you are, even if like you show him that this is all made up by Diodorus and Ctesias, and they're writing all these legends about Semiramis, and Nabonidus is another one. He's like some fake Persian king that they just wait, not Nabonidus. Which one is it? It's one of they. So if you read Diodorus, there's legends in there. It's, by the way, this is a lot of the shit's made up. So is the Bible. You don't hear him saying that about the Bible, actually. Like King David stories, he takes those very seriously. But all right. The point I'm making is this has nothing to do with if it's true or not. Could it influence Christianity? So let's just say, which you are correct, that all of this is made up by Diodorus and Ctesias. It doesn't matter for a first century gospel writer. They could still be drawing from this. So you didn't actually debunk this guy. All you did is say, no, I don't like his sources. Does that make sense? Do you guys understand what I'm saying right now? It's like, oh my God, how do I say this? Because you didn't actually debunk this guy's video. All you did was say Diodorus and Ctesias agree with you. That's what you basically said in another way. Do you understand? Did that make sense? Anyone understand what I just said there? Because what you just did was you just kind of gave him an alley-oop to dunk on you with. He can come back with, right now, that guy, even though he's so wrong, he's reading Alexander Hislop, he can come back and say, yeah, I don't care if Diodorus is wrong. I don't care if Ctesias is wrong. All I care about is that the Christians were using those sources in the first century, and that's where it came from. And then what are you going to say to that? Oh, shit. You can't say anything about that. You know what I mean? So it's just, you're being so scholar brained right now, and it's like, yeah, he does this with the Molech thing too, because when obviously Molech is made up, but when he's getting written about in the Book of Kings and Chronicles, they're just gonna sync him up with the Melachim of the Ammonites. Who cares? It's like what doesn't even matter. It's all made up. The whole fucking Bible's made up. Like none of this shit really happened the way they say it does. I don't know. Maybe that's just my own skepticism of the Bible. But let's go back to what he said. Let's just hear what he says.
Myth to make them sound a lot cooler than they really were. And in the 19th century, a man named Alexander Hislop wrote a book called The Two
Okay, so he does know.
Babylons, which was basically an anti-Catholic screed that tried to take up these traditions that had been made up by Ctesias and Diodorus Siculus and tried to create a historical narrative about this figure, and then tried to link that with the development of the Catholic Church and suggest that it is the Church of Satan. And it's just a misguided, ahistorical, anti-Catholic screed that unfortunately has been picked up by people on the internet today as if it were historical fact, and it's not.
She was the goddess of fertility, and they used to celebrate her by basically, I'm just going to say it, having a big orgy.
No, they did not. This is entirely made up, and it is one of the oldest and most idiotic conspiracy theories in the book. They engage in ritual sex and sacrifice babies is exactly what early Romans said about early Christians in order to try to vilify and demonize them.
They adopted the rabbit as a symbol because rabbits are very, what's the word I'm looking for? Promiscuous?
No, they didn't, and that image is of a Mayan artifact from less than 1400 years ago. The association of rabbits with Easter was formalized in the 19th century, and it was based on a tradition that comes from medieval Europe, which was based on the observation that the European brown hare can conceive a second litter before it has given birth to the first, which means it can birth a litter and then very shortly after birth another, seemingly without going through a full gestational period. And so within medieval Europe, it was associated with parthenogenesis, with virgin birth, which means it was associated with the Virgin Mary. And so you see woodcuts and you see iconography where Mary has hairs around her or is holding hairs. And so hairs become associated with the Virgin Mary, become associated with Jesus. And in the 19th century, that becomes formalized as rabbits becoming associated with Easter. It is an internal Christian development.
So that's why they adopted the rabbit as a symbol. They also adopted the egg as a symbol of fertility.
No, they didn't. Eggs, just like rabbits, became formally associated with Easter in the 19th century.
So I have my own thoughts on the eggs thing and the rabbits thing. So yesterday during Easter, I was outside enjoying the breeze, and I saw like 3 rabbits run right past me, all chasing each other. And in the north part of the world where I live in New York, and I think climate wise, we're very close to like Northern Europe over here, where I think this is just the time when rabbits start coming out of wherever they like. This is just the time of the year where you start seeing them all over the place. And then eggs, probably the same thing, because you're like I think it just has to do with the seasonal time. So that's probably what has to do with seeing the same now that's just rabbits. The eggs thing, like I said, you see this in Persian sources and Egyptian sources. This was already, they were doing this though. So it probably makes sense that you would have those things all in common in different parts of the world. That's what I think. I don't think there's anything really much to it. I don't think there's anything like super cultic about it, or like, you know, like deep esoteric meaning of the rabbit. I just think, right, it's just the time of the year you start seeing rabbits, you know.
But that also goes back to a medieval European tradition. Easter marks the end of Lent, and in medieval Europe, they fasted from meat and dairy and things like that during Lent. Eggs keep a lot better than milk and cheese and meat. And so there were a lot of eggs around at the end of Lent. So it became traditional to celebrate the end of Lent with eggs. And then the elite.
Yeah, and you're ignoring. See, this is what I don't gel with. Why wouldn't you at least bring up that Egyptians and Persians were doing this, and that's a possible, like, you do not know about that, or are you? It's like, which one's worse? Do you not know that that's the case, or are you withholding that information because you don't want to like suggest that could be a possibility? I don't know which, because one of them says you're not really well up to date on what's other cultures what they're doing. Like, coloring eggs is a thing we see already in other places. This isn't just some medieval European invention. Hope he knows that. I don't know if it seems like he doesn't even know that, to be honest.
Began to exchange eggs, and they would paint them in symbolic colors: red for the blood of Jesus, green for new birth, yellow for joy. And so that is where the association of eggs with the celebration of Easter comes from, and it becomes formalized as we know it today in the 19th century.
And they would have these huge orgies, and obviously there would be a lot of pregnancies during this time. The babies would be born 9 months later, right around Christmas time. Go figure. And then 3 months after that, we have Easter again. And the babies that were born 3 months earlier from the pregnancies that took place the Easter before, they would take these babies and offer these babies to their god.
No, they wouldn't. This is another absolutely asinine conspiracy theory that was fabricated out of thin air and is not supported by any data whatsoever from the ancient world.
And then they would take the eggs that they adopted as their symbol, and they would dip these eggs in the red substance that came from the baby's offerings. And this is where dying Easter eggs come from. This is where that tradition comes from.
No, it is absolutely not.
And Ishtar, which sounds oddly familiar to Easter. Ishtar, Easter. Yeah. Lines up.
No, it doesn't.
Does it?
Are we all? I would look into this. I would research it, research the occult origins of Easter.
Pro tip: before you go research it by Googling occult origins of Easter, learn how to research.
Sure. No, I mean, it makes some fair point. He makes some good. That's not the video. I don't know what video I was watching. I'm not going to be able to find it, so I'm just going to have to explain it. He was talking. Somehow he got into the whole topic of dying and rising gods. I wish I could play the video because I want you to hear the way he talks about it. He's like, it's like he's getting mad. Like, you can just hear it in his voice. He said something along the lines of, "This is all from James Fraser in the 20th century, dying and rising gods, which has been categorically denied by scholars today." And it's like, no, that's not true. You do get no. Let's go through the history. I wanted to do this, so I actually was going through the Wikipedia article on the dying and rising gods thing because I'm fast. I wanted to know, like, what's the history. I like this. I like going through Wikipedia because it gives you a good history of the history of things, like when certain things went down. So let's go to that real quick. And there's where is it? That's not it. Dying and rising god. Where'd you go? I thought I had this Wikipedia page ready to go. I guess not. I'll just look it up again. But he's not wrong about the scholarship has been going away from it. Okay, so what do I mean by that? Dying and rising deity. So he's right. If I wish I could play the video because I want you to hear what he says. He said, but this is exactly what he says. He says this is a concept that James Frazier coined in the 19th century. And basically, by the way, I have 2 copies of his book, and you have to read it. Most people that don't like James Frazier have not read his book. I can guarantee that. I would bet my life savings that Dan McClellan has never read this book. I would bet you my life savings that somebody told him it wasn't good, and now he just says it's not good. And that's like a lot of unfortunate dogmas in academia, that everyone just accepts the dogma, and then that's just, you hear this all the time. Like, how many people have I ran into who told me that Dennis McDonald's book is Parallelomania, and then when I ask them if they read it, they say no. I've gotten this. I'm not kidding. It got to the point where I've called Derek and was like, Derek, this is another person who I just talked to who told me that Dennis McDonald's work is Parallelomania and hasn't read the book. So that's how there's certain things in the academic world that are just sort of like, this is what we believe, and everyone just sort of follows suit, not knowing why they believe it. I don't want to sound like this is like a conspiracy theory or anything, but I'm just saying this is just how things are. This is how anything is. Anything, sports, medicine, or film. There's always going to be like certain things that are like taboo, certain things that are just everyone just follows. It's just the way it is. And this is one of them. The idea of dying and rising God is just one of those things that people are taught to have a knee-jerk reaction to it. So let's go through the history, shall we? And did I lose the page again? Where did I go? Where'd it go? Shit. I have so many pages. Here we go. Okay. Dying and rising gods. Frazier's interpretation of the category has been critically discussed in the 20th century scholarship to the conclusion that many examples of the world's mythologies included under dying and rising should only be considered dying, but not rising. And that genuine dying and rising gods characters, I disagree with this. I think, and by the way, I don't think they should call it dying. I think it should be called the katabasis, the descent, and the anabasis, the return. So if they can so this is my personal 2 cents on this subject. The category shouldn't be dying and rising. It should be descending and returning. And a lot of people who think these gods don't rise are actually wrong, because what they do is they do this scholar brain thing. Like they do, like this is like what Dan does, where he'll take a text, like let's Attis, for example, and he'll find one version of Attis. I'm not saying this is Dan. I'm just speaking in general. This is what I've noticed this. I can't stand this. They'll find one version of the Attis story. And in this particular version of the Attis story, Attis doesn't necessarily resurrect. And they'll say, so he's just a dying god who doesn't resurrect. We need to recategorize Attis now. But that's false. You have to look at Attis as a whole. Attis has a holy week celebrated to him. I'll show you what it's called and everything. It's called the Holy Week for Attis, the Hilaria, the end of March. By the way, you see that tree enters on March 22nd? They performed a ritual mourning where they would take the tree, a pine tree. They decked the pine tree with a bunch of ornaments. And then they would place it underground, 6 feet underground, and bury it like they're burying a dead body. On the 25th, 3 days later, they literally would rejoice for his resurrection. So you have, you can't make this shit up. You have, this goes back to ancient Phrygia. We don't even know how old it is. We know, and they started doing this in Rome around 200 BC. So we know in Roman times, they started doing this around 200 BC. But what I'm saying is you have a god who dies. So my whole point is fuck the myths. Fuck the text. Who cares what this version of that? Oh, the Bacchae says this. No. You're doing it all wrong. And this was James Frazier's approach too. All I'm doing is I'm saying James Frazier's approach was way better than anyone is doing today. James Frazier's approach was to look at the festivals as a whole. What do people say about the god? Who gives a shit about what this one text says? Because that's not going to influence anything. If we're talking about first century Christian authors, they're not going to be comparing one text in their head that they're only allowed to draw from this one text. No, in their head, they're drawing from the whole culture as a whole. That makes no sense to just say, oh, the Bacchae doesn't match up to John's gospel, so therefore they're not the same. No. You got to look at the whole thing as a whole. And the thing is, Attis is a god who dies at the spring equinox and rises 3 days later, according to this festival. So is it possible that when the stories of Jesus' resurrection are being written down, that they're looking at divine figures from around the way and maybe applying that stuff to Jesus? I mean, is that crazy? Is that really that crazy? You think that's really crazy to think that? I mean, seriously. So that's my whole point about like these people can be so scholar brained and think, well, we have to compare text to text. No, you don't. You don't have to do anything. Look at the culture as a whole. That's what you should be doing. That's the way James Frazier approached it as. And I couldn't agree more. I think James Frazier is brilliant. I'll read his book a million times before I ever get sick of it. I love James Frazier. I think his book's amazing. And it's unfortunate that you'll hear people say, and this is what Dan said, and this is what kind of pissed me off. He didn't say anything about Frazier's book of why it's wrong. He just said it is. What do I mean by that? So Dan's rebuttal to the dying and rising concept was this. He said, no, this is a category from James Frazier called Dying and Rising Gods that comes from the Golden Bog, written in the 19th century. Okay? You just described the origin. You would think the next logical thing to do would say, why is it incorrect? What is it about it that scholars reject today? Did you personally read the book? Did you personally reject parts of this book? Which parts was it? What's off about it? Is it a redundant category? All right, let's talk about that. But that's not what happened. He just literally stated what it was as if that somehow is a rebuttal. And I just remember watching it thinking to myself, how did you just get away with that? Like, how do you just get away? You just said what it was as if it was. I know what that is. It's Dying and Rising God from James Frazier. Anyways, next subject, next thing. Over. That's done. Like, you don't just get to say that and then that becomes the rebuttal somehow. So let's go through the history. And it says it's okay. So what happened was this Dying and Rising God motif catches on like wildfire. Everyone loves it. Other authors start picking up on it. They start using this in their books. So yeah, James Frazier develops the concept. Ellen Harrison, British scholar, also picks up on the concept. Gerald Macy argued that there are similarities between the Egyptian dying and rising god myths and Jesus, but Macy's factual errors often render his works nonsense. I never read Macy, so I don't know. All right. So here's what happens. Carl Jung loves this, by the way. Jung has a book called Aion. He's all about this dying and rising motif. All right. So what happened then? Why do scholars reject it today? Here's what happened. The category of dying and rising God was debated throughout the 20th century. Most modern scholars questioning its ubiquity in the world's mythologies. That's according to Jane Gary in 2004. Whoops. By the end of the 20th century, the overall scholarly consensus had emerged against the category, given its limited applicability to the ancient Near Eastern religions and derived traditions. Once again, that's from Jane Gary. Kurt Rudolph in 1986 argued that the oft-made connection between the mystery religions and the idea of dying and rising divinities is defective. Okay. Gerald O'Collins, Jesuit priest and academic. By the way, a lot of these people coming out against this category are Christians. You're going to find that. So here's one of them. Gerald O'Collins, Australian Jesuit priest and academic, states that the surface level application of analogous symbolism is the case of parallelomania. There's that word. They love that word, which exaggerates the importance of trifling resemblances long abandoned by mainstream scholars. I don't even know who this is, but I can guarantee you they never read James Frazer. Actually, I shouldn't say guarantee. They might have. But parallelomania is a terrible way to describe James Frazer, because James Frazer is not going into the mythologies as much as he's going into the culture. He's going into the rites. He's going into the festivals. He's looking at it from a macro perspective of like culture influencing culture. He's looking at it the way I think like a scientist would look at it. So you can't use parallelomania as a charge against that. You can only use parallelomania against somebody comparing two different stories in two different texts. Anyways, so that's just one of them. Mettinger in 2001 affirms that many of the gods of mystery religions and do indeed die, descend to the underworld, and are lamented and retrieved by a woman and restored to life. However, Mettinger also disincludes Christianity from its influence. All right, I respect Mettinger on that because he sees it. Right, by the way, is that Bruce Mettinger? If that is, I'm going to laugh. Trevet Mettinger? Yeah, that is. No, that's Bruce Metzger. Yeah, no, that's a different Mettinger. Okay, good. I was going to laugh if that was Bruce Mettinger. Okay, never mind. Bruce Metzger. Okay. So this scholar, whoever this is, he notices it, that you get gods that descend. There it is, katabasis. He even used the correct word that I would use. The gods that descend to the underworld. By the way, lamenting. That's a huge one, according to me and James Frazer. The mourning rites, the mourning for Tammuz, the mourning for Adonis, the mourning for Attis, the mourning for Osiris. Across the board, this is a must. You got to have that in there. I wouldn't even if there's no mourning, don't even count it. Take it off the category. I don't even care. I don't really care about Asclepius's death. People talk about Asclepius's death. No, that doesn't. I don't care about that. The big ones to me are Adonis, Attis, Osiris, and Tammuz. And then Jesus. Those are the big ones. And then Eshmun is another one. You don't know about Eshmun yet. Eshmun never gets talked about. Eshmun is the one that is the missing link that ties them all together. Anyways, we'll get to that later. So this guy notices it, right? Here's what happens though. It gets worse. The concept of a dying and rising God has a longer story. It was significantly, I already mentioned that, James Frazer. At first received favorably, the idea was attacked by a priest. Of course. Why? Who else would it? Who? If you're paying attention, you'll see what I mean in a second. So another priest who, oh no, you can't tell me that Jesus is borrowing from other religions. That can't be. Tell me anything but that. Deny it. Go ahead. Deny all the miracles. I don't care. You're allowed to do all that stuff. Just don't tell me that my religion isn't special. Anything but that. As long as Christianity is special, you can say there are no. You could deny the resurrection. You can deny all the miracles. You can deny all of it. Just never tell me that my religion isn't special. That's the kind of thing you get with this stuff, right? So another person attacks this idea in 1933. Now here's the big one. This guy right here, Jonathan Z. Smith, comes along. Leading scholars in the destruction of Frazer. This is a fact. This is well written by whoever wrote this. Jonathan Z. Smith comes along, and he writes a scathing. Actually, I'm pretty sure it was his PhD thesis. Pretty sure it was his PhD thesis, and he I'll hand it to him. You got to hand it to big heavy hitters. Jonathan Z. Smith is a big heavy hitter. He does not like dying and rising gods. He does not like James Frazer, and he wrote a PhD thesis, and it became the status quo. 1969. I was right. Dissertation discusses Frazer's golden bug. Here it is, right here. The glory, jest, and riddle. James Frazer. I wonder if we can read this. It's not letting me pull it up. You don't have to wear a toga to study ancient Rome. Okay. Anyways, it brought me somewhere else. Anyways, I wanted to read it, but that would have been cool to read that. And in Myrikia Iliades 19. Now here's the big. Now this is a big deal though, because Jonathan Z. Smith does not think the category needs to go away. He just criticizes the use of it. This is a big deal. People act like this. He came along and destroyed the category and it needs to go away. But if you actually read what he says, like in the 1987 Encyclopedia of Religion, he wrote the Dying and Rising Gods entry, where he dismisses the category as largely a misnomer based on imaginative reconstructions and exceedingly late or highly ambiguous text. That's the way people use it. And that's true. That's a very true statement. People use the category to go reckless with it. That's not how Frazer used it, though. Frazer's book does not get into text as much as these other people who come after Frazer do. He's all about the culture and the rituals and the festivals and the Adonia festival and the Dionysia festivals and what they were doing there. And they're performing plays dedicated to Dionysus, mourning over his dismemberment and then rejoicing over his resurrection, suggesting. So here's what he does. The big critic Jonathan Z. Smith suggests a more detailed categorization into dying gods and disappearing gods, arguing that before Christianity, the two categories were distinct, and gods who died did not always return, and those who returned never truly died, that's not true. I could show him up on that all day long. Smith gave a more detailed account of his views, specifically on the question of parallels to Christianity. In Drudgery Divine 1990, Smith's 1987 article was widely received. During the 1990s, scholarly consensus starts to shift. Of course it does, especially when you have a whole entire SBL, a whole Christian category of scholarship that just wants a savior like Smith to come along and tell him it's okay. It's all okay. Your religion's special again. And his rejection of the concept is oversimplified. Blah, 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 blah. But here's what no one's going to tell you. They think it ends there. Especially these Christian scholars. They think it ends there. Here we go. Beginning with an overview of the Athenian ritual of growing and withering herb gardens at the Adonis festival. In his book, The Gardens of Adonis, Marcel Detienne suggests that rather than being a stand-in for crops in general, and therefore the cycle of death and rebirth, the herbs were part of a complex of association in the Greek mind that centered on spices. These associations include seduction, trickery, gormandizing, anxieties of childbirth. So, yeah, people charge it with reductionism and all that stuff. But there are scholars in the last 10 to 20 years who have come along and Dag Osten-Menzo, scholar of religion, points out a number of those often defined actually died as mortals, they are resurrected from the dead. This Mettinger, who supports the category of dying and rising gods, stated in 2001, there was a scholarly consensus that the category is inappropriate from historical perspective. As of 2009, the Encyclopedia of Psychology and Religion summarizes the current scholarly consensus as ambiguous, with some scholars rejecting Frazer's broad universalist category, preferring to emphasize the difference between various traditions, which is what I agree with. The differences matter. There isn't just similarities. In the 2010s, this is a good one too. I like this. I actually looked this girl up. Paula Corrente conducted an extensive survey of the status of the dying. This is recent, 2010s, of the dying and rising God category. While she agrees that much of Fraser's specific evidence was faulty, she argues that the category as a whole is valid. Though and by the way, you won't hear Christian scholar telling you this. They just forget. This is not. They don't care about that. This is probably that's blasphemous. Get her out of here. Get her out of here. Though she suggests modifications to the specific criteria, as I do. Change the word from dying and rising to katabasis and anabasis, the descent and return of the hero. Doesn't have to be a god. Doesn't have to be a person. Doesn't have to be a daemon. Doesn't have to be anything. We're talking about the descent and the return of the hero. So that might sound like, okay, you just made it so broad that everything has that. Not really. We're talking about a specific idea of gods that descend into the netherworlds and then come back up triumphantly against all odds. And then you have the mourning rituals. That's got to be there too, in my opinion. Those specific things. And then the category ends up with Jesus, Attis, Adonis, Osiris, Eshmun, Tammuz, Persephone. There's 7. I'll give you 7 for now. I mean, but like at least it's not like Asclepius. Oh, he died and got raised up to the constellations. Nah, I don't really care about Asclepius. You can leave him out. Huanquintos, I'd put him in there because he doesn't descend into the netherworld, but he's killed, he's mourned over, and then he rises. So he's got most of it. So you would have to have like some gods that have all the traits and some gods that don't have them all, that are close. You'd have to have like different categories. But the whole point of this isn't to just categorize gods. The point of this is to show that there's some sort of like mythotype happening in the Gospels. That's what I think. So she thinks these examples include the goddess Inanna in Sumerian text and Baal in Ugaritic text, whose myths, Corrente argues, offer concrete examples of death and resurrection. Corrente also utilizes the example of Dionysus, whose connection to the category is more complicated, but has still been largely ignored or miscategorized by scholars, including Fraser himself, in her view. So I listened to this podcast that she did with somebody. Here it is right here. Philology and the comparative study of myths. I recommend this. They talk about this. In this week's podcast, Dr. Paola Corrente gives insights into the use of how philological approach can be beneficial for not only providing a common and solid framework for comparative research, but also providing more suitable ways of the classification according to linguistic criteria. Her work on dying gods that die but come back to life, of ancient Greece and Mesopotamia, draws on the concept formulated by James Fraser. So look it. Sorry, fucking Dan, but you're full of shit. You just told everybody on your channel that this is a fucking dead category. But literally, you got fucking scholars literally still writing about it in philology. I hate that shit. People just say shit like they think they know everything. They don't. So, yeah. Why is that? Why is there such a knee-jerk reaction to comparing Jesus to other gods? You ever thought about that? It's very strange. And it's funny because the comment that made me do this video was somebody commenting on Derek was sharing my video and saying, Dan McClellan debunked your video even though I haven't saw it yet. I just saw the title of it. So you just saw the title of my video and you figured Dan McClellan debunked it. Well, try that again. All right, let's see if we got any Oh, you have a thought about backyard professors here. What's your thoughts, man? They want Jesus in a vacuum. Yeah, I agree. I totally agree with you on this. And like David, like Dr. McDonald says, Christianity is the only fish that can't get wet. That's what it is. It's the secret, it's the special, sacred, pure religion. It's written in Greek for Greeks, but it can't have Greek influence somehow. It's silly. I say eradicate biblical scholarship. If you're a seminarian student, you're wasting your money. You shouldn't be there. Get a classics degree. Do it the right way. Become a classicist. Study Greek, and then you'll know what the gospel. Then you'll be able to understand the Gospels. So, let me see. What other source that I wanted to show? I think I got some other stuff in here too. I think there's a better way to check for super chats that I don't have to scroll all the way down. I think I can go to my YouTube studios. Oh wait, no, I can't do that. I really hope I didn't miss any super chats because I wasn't looking the whole time. I don't know if was there any. Can anyone tell me? I don't see any. Damn, there's a lot of comments today. Okay, good. Hope I didn't miss anything. I can't see them, but I don't think there's anything there. I sent you one. Oh, wait, I saw yours. I saw yours, right? I saw yours. Thank you, Tetragrammaton. I saw yours. Appreciate that. Oh, wait, there it is right there. Yes. Yeah, this is the one I read too. Okay, cool. I'll read it again though. May we all reach closer to Gnosis each day. So, I don't know. My whole point was like, I just thought it was funny that somebody thought my video was debunked before someone even watched it. But all right, yeah, this was an April Fool's joke. You guys got me on that one. Not today, Satan. So what do you guys think? Any questions? Why are the Bible scholars so awful laziness? They are indeed bad. There's some good ones. There's some good ones. This is what I honestly think. I'm not just saying this. The categories, I'm not saying like, how do I say this? Scholarship should just be one thing. They shouldn't have borders around Bible scholarship and then Greek and Roman classicists. They just got to put it all. Whoever it should just be classics. One field classics. That's it. Because the whole reason for like dividing Bible scholarship up to me is so sketchy. Because it's like you're getting your own. There's like this own category for this special thing that deserves to have its own special category. I call bullshit on that. Let's see what else we got. Oh, yeah. Let me ask you this. So, one of the things I noticed, this is the wrong source. Osiris and On Isis and Osiris by Plutarch. Another thing he mentions is I'm trying to find the right page. Here it is. He talks about this mediator concept. He says Zoroaster has taught that men should make votive offerings and thank offerings to Ura Mazda, averting the mourning offerings to Ariminus. He's talking about and the Greek word that's used here is charisteria. Charis being grace. And the word is eucharia. Eucharist. Literally have the two words be put together. It's Eucharist. And I don't think it's a coincidence that when Justin Martyr's talking about the Eucharist coming from Zoroaster, I think he's looking at the same sources that Plutarch's looking at there that we just lost. Who knows what it is, because they're both mentioning Zoroaster doing some sort of Eucharist. And in that passage, Mithras is a mediator. It's a very specific title. You know what I mean? The Mithras, the mediator. See what it says right there on the right? For this reason, the Persians give to Mithras the name mediator, which is also the name Jesus gets in the Gospels, the mediator. I had that in my notes. I don't know what I had that in for, but that's one of my notes. So then you get this god named Dionysus Sabazius. And it turns out that down in Egypt, syncretism is a big thing. Sabazius plays a role in associating with God and other divinities, especially the Egyptians. The cult of Sabazius exists alongside other gods and cults. Also, the cult encircled the Mediterranean area in different sites. Sabazius identified with Isiaca, so that we can find Sabazius adopting the attributes of Isis, especially the sistrum. Sabazius is called, skekos, or epikos, listening to prayer, which is likewise a widespread epithet applied to Serapis. In other inscriptions, Sabazius is called Zeus Helios Megas Kurios Sabazios. The Kurios, having power, authority, or lord, master, and guardian, is attested in Sabazius inscriptions. So, why did I bring up this god? Because I'm looking at another example from the same time period of this sort of hero, lord, Megas, the great lord, sort of a similar god, salvation, soter god. And this god gets called Yao. Yao is what Diodorus and Macrobius calls this god. It's like this syncretic god. Look, he uses the same passage here. One Zeus, one Hades, one Helios, one Dionysus. The authority of this verse, based on the oracle of Apollo Clarius, in which another name of the sun is added, which is the sacred name Yao, for Apollo Clarius consulted. One of the gods should be considered, which is called Yao. Orgia men dedatos ekran Neputhia, Kuthian. So yeah, you get this god in there. That's an Orphic hymn. Oh yeah, this is the big one that I wanted to mention. Now I remember where I wanted to go. I got about 10 minutes left, so hang with me for a second. I got something that I wanted to add to all this. So this is actually a big part. Ready for this?
And because they're in.
Okay, that's not the one. I want to play a video. One second. I'm going to find something. Here we go.
John 1:1 does not say.
This was something else that I noticed that since we're talking about Dan, I might as well bring it up.
John 1:1 does not say the word was God. Hey everybody, I'm Dan McClellan. I'm a scholar of the Bible and religion. And the academic consensus, even among evangelical scholars of the New Testament, is that the word theos in the clause ke theosino logos at the end of John 1:1 does not mean the word was God. It is being used qualitatively. That is, it's not identifying a specific individual, it's identifying a quality possessed by the word. And what is that quality? It's divinity. So the best translation would be, and the word was divine. And probably the most authoritative discussion of this is found in Daniel Wallace's 1996 book, Greek Grammar Beyond the Basics. And here you see a few pages where he discusses why it's not definite, but why it is qualitative. Now, Wallace then goes on to say the word was divine is a great translation, but he then imposes a bunch of.
All right, this was interesting for me because I looked into this. I'm like, the translation, he's actually right. Like, obviously he's right. He's a linguist. Why wouldn't he be? But I just wanted to, like, I'm the type of person, I want to know, like, what other linguists are saying. I went to my Greek teacher, asked him about this. And it's correct that the way he's presenting the English is correct. But the person that he was just talking about there, Dan Wallace, I think his name is, I agree with what he's saying. And I'll show you why. So let me go back. Daniel B. Wallace. Okay. This is the first time I'm actually going to agree with a Christian. Well, I guess there's two Christians here, so it doesn't really matter. But I agree with Daniel B. Wallace in his assessment, and I can prove it with sources. So there's something that Dan says here that can he does this again. He gives you a really low bar to leap over. I'll show you what I mean. Let's play that part again.
Divinity. So the best translation would be, and the word.
Let me see. Present. Okay.
Was divine. And probably the most authoritative discussion of this is found in Daniel Wallace's 1996 book, Greek Grammar Beyond the Basics. And here you see a few pages where he discusses why it's not definite, but why it is qualitative. Now, Wallace then goes on to say the word was divine is a great translation, but he then imposes a bunch of Trinitarian presuppositions upon the text.
This is where I disagree with Dan. Daniel Wallace is correct, I think. And I think you can look at the data to support this. And the reason why is, let's look at the Greek. Let's look at the text. John 1 in Greek. John 1 in Greek. Let's just take a look at what we're looking at. John 1 Linear Bible. Perfect. So I'm gonna leave this pause for now. We'll go back to it when I get a chance. In arche, in logos, kai logos, in pros ton theon, kai theos, and logos. All right. It's funny because when I first saw this, I didn't understand what he was saying. Because if you look at en arche, in logos, in the word was the word, right? Was the word. That's it. Simple. Was the word. And then it says, and the word in pros ton theon. And God was the word. So you're thinking, how can the same three words be different? In o logos, in o logos. Well, it turns out that without the with the way it's ordered, the way the Greek is written and ordered, that it would only make sense for him to be describing the logos as divine. So he's right. And there's like nothing there's no other. It's like done. It's like case closed. And Daniel B. Wallace even admits this too. And I think it's cool to, for people like Dan McClellan to be like teaching some real Greek here. But here's where we get into the Trinity being present. I think that this is going to blow some of your mind away. I guess it's my shirt, right? I guess I'm a Christian. I think the Trinity is legit, guys. The Trinity is in John. I changed my mind on this. The Christians are correct. The Trinity has always been there since whoever wrote John. And I think whoever wrote John intended there to be a Trinity. Here's why. Here's what I see. First of all, what's being described as divine? Let's look at that, right? So you got the Logos, but then when you keep going, you get another character that enters the scene. In him, Zoe was. And the Zoe, kai e Zoe, ento phos ton anthropon. And the Zoe was the light of the humans. I should say humans, people. It says men, but anthropon could just mean people. And the phos, ente scotia, Thani, kai e scotia auto o katabelen. So you have God, Theos, right here. You have the Logos, and then you have this other character that no one wants to talk about, Zoe. So I don't know what Daniel B. Wallace's argument was. I don't really care, because what I care about is what the sources say. What are the earliest Christians saying about this passage? So let's go to what I consider to be a great source for early Christianity. And that is none other. Let's see, where did I put it? Damn, I think I lost it. I thought I had it here. I'll have to look it up again. But okay, so I'm looking for Hippolytus against all heresies. Here it is. I just have to pull it up again. Just give me 1 second. Here it is. Okay. Share my screen. This is gonna blow you away. Check this out. All right. So if you look through Hippolytus is a huge text. Hippolytus of Rome. He wrote at the early 3rd. Now you're probably thinking, early 3rd? That's way late in the game, man. We're talking 100 years after John was written, at least. Well, no, because the stuff that he's writing about Christians from the early 2nd century, mainly the Valentinians, the Sethians, the Naseni. He writes about Basilides, who's from the 1st century. Same Basilides that Clement talks about, who's the first one to celebrate the birth of Christ on January 6th. So all this stuff's in there. Now, the first thing he talks about in this book, which is really interesting, is the philosophers of Athens. Now, that's weird. I thought this was weird when I first opened this book up. You're like, why is the refutator who's supposed to write against heresies of Christianity, why is he writing about Thales and Pythagoras? Because this is the tradition that Christianity comes out of. He even shows it too. So he talks about Anaximander, Anaximenes, Anaxagoras, Archelaus, Parmenides, Democritus, Xenophanes, Hippo, all these philosophers, right? And then he talks about Aristotle, Plato, Zeno. He's just listing off all the greats. But he gets into them. He starts explaining like how their ideas find their way into Christianity. And everyone should read this. Seriously, if you want to understand like early Gnostic Christianity. And the way it seems like the argument he's trying to make is that the true Orthodox Christianity is like pure, just Jewish. There is no leaven in the bread. There is no philosophy. There is no Thales or Pythagoras. Just pure just straight from the prophets like Isaiah and those guys. And that's what they're trying to argue. It's all bullshit. They're all of them are drawing from Pythagoras and Plato. And if they're saying otherwise, they're liars. But for some reason, what this text actually shows me, that it's like the cool thing to do is to deny all that stuff. Make it seem like all your stuff is divine, it comes from God, and there's no humans behind this stuff. So you want to hide your Platonism. You don't let anyone see it. Hide the Plato. Put it underneath the bed. Don't let anyone see that book. That's kind of like the vibe I get from Hippolytus. So okay, he gets into all the Pythagorean stuff, but then this is the reason why I brought up that first, is because I want to show you something. He starts talking about triads. Now Dan in that video makes a good point that Trinitarianism is something that comes later. The question though is how late and where, and is it come out of thin air in the 3rd and 4th century? I don't think so. I think you can trace the Trinity to the Pythagorean Platonic idea of God having a nature of 3. And in particular, it's the monad, which gives birth to a duad, and then the duad becomes a triad. And you get this in Plato's Timaeus, you get this in Philo's writings, and you get this here. And here's where the Trinity of John comes in. Because if you look up Zoe, here we go. So he's talking about the Simonians. You know, they're obviously like the Gnostics, right? And he talks about their idea of logos and Zoe, and anthropos and ecclesia. So you see some ideas that you see from John. Now, here's where he writes about the Valentinians. He says the Valentinians are convicted for plagiarisms from Platonic and Pythagorean philosophy. The Valentinian theory of emanation of the duads. All right, what does he say? If you go down a little bit, he says, but as to Siege, whether at any time she is united in marriage to the Father or not, this is a point which we leave them to wrangle about themselves. We at present, keeping to the Pythagorean principle, which is one, and unwedded, unfeminine, and deficient in nothing. That's monism for you. Pure, perfect oneness. Shall proceed to give an account of their doctrines as they have themselves. There is Valentinus, not at all, or says Valentinus, not anything at all begotten, but the Father is alone, unbegotten, not subject to the condition of place, not subject to the condition of time, having no counselor. That's an interesting word, because you get that in Isaiah. People think Isaiah is an Old Testament prophecy of the Trinity. And now I'm starting to think they might be right, at least in the sense that whoever is writing the Trinity is drawing from Isaiah. We can argue about that stuff later. Anyways, not being in any other substance that could be realized according to ordinary methods of perception. The Father, however, was solitary, subsisting, as they say, in a state of quietude in himself, reposing in isolation within himself. When, however, he became productive, it seemed to him expedient at one time to generate and lead forth the most beautiful and perfect of those germs of existence, which he possessed within himself. This is not just a triad. This is coming from himself. This is a trinity. For the Father was not fond of solitariness, for says he was all love. But love is not the love except there may be some object of affection. The Father himself then, as he was solitary, projected and produced nous, mind, and aletheia, that is a duad, which becomes mistress and origin. And the mother of all ions computed them as existing within the pleroma. Nous and aletheia being projected from the Father, one capable of continuing generation, deriving existence from a productive being, nous himself likewise, in imitation of the Father, projected Logos and Zoe. And Logos and Zoe project Anthropos and Ecclesia. All right, let's hold that thought. We got to go back to what Dan was saying. What did he just say about the Trinity? We got to hear that. We got to hear that again.
And assumes that the being of God exhausts the category of deity. Therefore, anything that is divine must be part of the identity of God. And then he distinguishes the person of God from the being of God, which is a distinction that was not made anywhere near the composition of the Gospel of John. So
whoa.
retro.
We just saw we saw the Valentinians. The Valentinians are gone by 150 AD. They're done by then. So whatever we were just reading was an idea somewhere between 100 and 150, I'm saying. It's the first half of the 2nd century. John was written probably around 100 AD. So we're talking contemporary with John. People are already the Valentinians. It's not just them either. It's other Christians as well. Now, Dan might say they don't count because they're Gnostics, but you're just pulling the same shit as the church. You're just working for the church now. If you say the Gnostics don't count, they're Christians too. Sorry, I have their back. But early on, you can't say there's nothing like this early on. There are ideas like this early on. I don't know if you just don't like the source, or you don't know the source. I don't know this is another example of that. I don't know which one's worse. You don't know the source, or you just don't like the source. All right, let's keep going.
Projecting later developed philosophical frameworks into the New Testament when they did not exist.
Wait a minute. That's not true. You can't say because he specifically calls it Logos and Zoe, projected from the Father. Now, John's Gospel, even though it does describe Logos as divine in the way that Dan says it does, you're still getting a tripart, a Trinity-esque God there of being the Father, the Logos, and Zoe. And it's all there in John 1. It's all there. It's very clear what's going on there. By the way, the writer of John, beautiful gospel, by the way, you can tell the way the way it's written is more like a tragedy, like the Bacchae. It's like a play. In like the Bacchae, in the beginning of the Bacchae, Dionysus is introduced, and the whole story is basically injected in the introduction. So as the story goes on, if we go back to what the text says in John, right? Did I click out of it? Let's go back to the text. John 1. So if we go back to the text, right? So Jesus is the Logos, obviously. But throughout the story of John, he's constantly being, compared to as being the light of the world, the life. These are all attributes of Jesus as well. So there's almost like clues of Jesus's divinity throughout John as he's being called the light of the world, the Phos, the life. All this stuff comes up again in the story. That's why this is a great introduction. It's written well. Whoever wrote this introduction was giving you like a foreshadow of who Jesus is. He didn't say Jesus yet. He says the Logos. But you find out very quickly as you're reading John, Jesus is that Logos. He is the divine figure. So the way I don't know, I'm sorry, I don't agree with the way Dan is portraying this. Why he thinks this is the case, I don't know. But he just doesn't want Jesus to be God. I don't know. I think that's kind of weird. I mean, I don't have a problem. Dude, I don't think Jesus literally was God. Do I believe in Jesus? No. But do I think John, the author, was trying to portray him that way? Why is that hard to believe? You know what I mean? Like, why do we have to try to tell people that John is not making Jesus into God? It just sounds like we were going too far with that. I just don't see that. Especially when you compare it with these early Gnostic groups like the Valentinians and the Basilidians and all these other groups that have their own triads, and they're mix matching their triad, and they're even calling it Zoe and Logos. It's game over. You cannot sit there and say that there is nothing like this that exists in the sources and that the Trinity just sprang up out of nowhere in the 4th century. It's just not true. It's showing lack of knowledge of the sources. Pure, straight up. It really is. So let's go back to the video. I don't know. I think there's a couple things left he has to say.
And so without the retrojection of those philosophical frameworks, the translation just says the word was divine. Now, a bunch of people are going to say, well, what about John 8:58? Or what about John 10:34? Or what about this verse and that verse and the other verse? And none of them identify Jesus as God in anything remotely approximating the sense that would develop later with the construction of the concept of the Trinity. And my next online class is going to be addressing precisely this. It will be called...
I don't think I agree with that. I think I get what he's saying. I don't know if he's like... I think he can argue what he's saying. No, but then you can't, because you're ignoring all of the sources that I just presented from Hippolytus that they're already reading John that way. So you can argue against it, but you can argue either way, I guess. I don't know.
Is Jesus God? The Christologies of the New Testament. And I'm going to go through the Gospel of Mark, and I'm going to go through the Gospel of John, and I'm going to go through Philippians and the other writings.
So this just happened on March 24th. I wonder if anyone watched this. I wonder if he mentions any of those interpretations of John from the Valentinians or the Basilidians or the Naseni. The next one I want to show you guys is the Naseni. This is a big one. So some of you might be asking, how do you know that these Christians are looking at Jesus in the same way as the other dying and rising gods? Well, here we go. I'll prove it to you. So there's another group called the Nasenes. Damn, that was annoying. The Nasenes are a group that's written about, and I can't find them in here for some reason. Addis. Here we go. All right, so there's a group called the Nasenes. They're from the middle of the 2nd century, and they also have like triads and all this different kind of things going on in their theology. They straight up compare Jesus to these other gods. They don't give a crap about being. They just do it. They just don't care. So there's a hymn that's out there. So you can see like the systems of the Naseni and the Assyrians support drawn from the Nasene and the Phrygian and Egyptian mysteries, the mysteries of Isis, these mysteries allegorized by the Naseni. These are the heads of the very numerous discourses which the Nasene asserts James, the brother of the Lord, handed down to Mariam. So this guy, he's called the Nasene preacher. Accordingly, he apparently he claimed to have a doctrine handed down by James, the brother of Jesus, given to Mariamne, in order that the impious heretics may no longer believe Mariam or James or the Savior himself. let us come to the mystic rites whence derive their figment to a consideration. Both barbarian and Greek mysteries, and let us see how these heretics collecting together in the sacred and ineffable mysteries of all the Gentiles, uttering falsehoods against Christ, making dupes of those who are acquainted with the orgies of the Gentiles. Who shall declare this generation? Learn how, partly deriving from the Gentiles, the undiscoverable and diversified generation of man, they fictitiously apply it to Christ. So he's saying that all these, look at, he's naming all these gods here. All these Greek and Roman gods are being applied to Christ in some way. Now, what do I mean by that? Well, this is one of the famous hymns that are ascribed to him. According to Hippolytus, this is a hymn to Attis. But this hymn, according to Hippolytus, was taken and reapplied to Jesus. And I you guys are, if you're watching for a while, you know this. I talk about it all the time, and I try to. The reason why I bring it up so much is because it's evidence. It's evidence that the early Christians in the 2nd century were looking at Jesus as one of these saviors: Osiris, Adamus, Attis, son of Kronos. It's all there. And so whenever people say there's no evidence that Christianity had any influence from these other deities, you just don't know the sources. It's there. Now, the way Bill Maher presents it is wrong. The way Zeitgeist presents it is wrong. In fact, just to show you how unbiased I am, I got into a big argument with Peter Joseph from Zeitgeist a couple years ago. Let's see if can you like look stuff up on X? Let me see if I can look it up. Is Peter Joseph even on there anymore? I don't think he's on Twix. I think he just left X. Yeah, he's gone. I can't find him anymore. Anyways, Peter Joseph from Zeitgeist. A couple of years ago, I got into a back and forth with him, and I was telling him, dude, your sources are crap. Like, you're pulling up sources that are just no good. And I said to him, this is what I said to him. I go, the reason why I'm even confronting you right now is because people look at this, and then as soon as you start actually doing the work and trying to compare Christianity to some other mystery religion, they immediately assume that I'm doing Zeitgeist. And it's like, you kind of just ruined it for everybody. And it's like Alexander Hislop, just straight up crap that's being made up. You know what I mean? And people look at it and they think, as soon as I mention dying and rising God, they think, oh, it's Zeitgeist again. It's not, though. So I just wanted to bring that up. But let's see what we got from comments. Notice he is not quoting Pindar or Homer. That's funny. Yeah. I mean, look, I just wanted to. I probably wouldn't have done this video if I didn't get like 30 comments from people. Dan McClellan debunked you. Dan McClellan debunked you. And I just don't want that. Okay, let's see it. I should just say the same thing. Let's see it. So I just wanted to address some of the here there are some super chats. I just found them. This is the one. I don't even know how I got to this. They're in starred, I guess. Have you ever made a video about the Flavian family creating the New Testament? I have. I think it's crap, to be honest. Because here's the thing about me. I'm not a big fan of like theories and master theories and putting together, because you can make anything true. If I wanted to say Augustus created Christianity, I can do it. I can selectively go out and find the evidence that I need to make it look like that's true. It's so easy to do. Flavians. Is there any evidence that the Flavians had anything to do with Christianity at all? No, there isn't. So the way people try to argue it is they try to look at things that happen in Vespasian's life that looks like Jesus's life, and somehow that makes him the same person. No. Now, I will say this. I do think some of the Roman Prov people have some points about there being aristocratic Alexandrian nobles, Romans, who probably wrote the Gospels. The Gospels were not written by some people who were fishermen. That's just fairy tale garbage that needs to get tossed out the window. That's not true. Whoever wrote the Gospels were highly literate, were highly well-trained in Greek, who were knowledgeable of all sorts of different topics like geography, like philosophy, mythology, theology. These people were not idiots. They were writing some texts down that became popular for a reason. They knew what they were doing. They were well written, and they nailed it. So the idea that some fisherman from Judea just randomly wrote the greatest text of all time that became the central text for religion as we know it, it's just crazy, stupid nonsense. So that's one thing that I do have in common with the Roman Prov people, is there probably was some sort of aristocratic faction, probably in Alexandria, I don't know, Pergamon maybe, Antioch, Syria maybe, somewhere else, next to some library somewhere where there's a lot of text. And that's where the Gospels are written. But you don't need the Flavians for that. The Flavians, by the way, the Flavians they came out of the, if you know anything about Roman history, it makes, the more you learn about Roman history, the less Flavian Christianity makes sense. Because the Flavians are an equestrian dynasty. They came out of the military. They took over after Nero. It was a military ranking family, the Flavians, who took over. They weren't this aristocratic, literate family that's writing text. So it was some other group in Alexandria that was doing that stuff. Yeah, the Flavian thing doesn't make any sense, but it's fun to talk about, I guess. It is interesting. You're right. It is interesting. I want to know who wrote the Gospels. No one knows who wrote the Gospels. That's one thing the Roman Prov people are doing that no one else is doing. They're trying to figure out who wrote the Gospels. Who else is trying to do that? No one cares. They just, Matthew, Mark, Luke, and John. Duh. It's like, no, someone wrote these texts. Someone with a real name from a real city. We just don't know who it is yet. No one knows. I mean, we could try to figure it out. I mean, I don't know. I can't wait. I cannot wait. I'll leave with this. I cannot wait to see what comes out of the library at Heracleum and Pompeii. I cannot wait. I cannot wait to see what happens. Because I don't know. There's a slight chance something comes out of that library that changes everything. Can only hope for the best. But yeah, I'm gonna end it there. It's been 2.5 hours, so I think it's been pretty fun. So I got another video coming out soon. I got some good video ideas is coming as well. And that's it. You've just attained true gnosis.